John, there's been a lot of stories this offseason, but I don't think any bigger than the continued buildup of a superpower out in Los Angeles with the Dodgers, and we have their general manager, Brandon Gomes, to talk all about it.
Absolutely. I'm glad, very glad you got a Dodger. They are the story of the offseason. They've made the best team even better. They're the best roster I've ever seen. And we have a new evil empire. A very nice guy, a friend of the show joining us. He's not evil, but the question whether that team is. So I'm glad we're getting Brandon Gomes for the show today.
Yeah, we'll ask him about being an evil empire and a lot more. Shohei Ohtani, Roki Sasaki, and the big story around here continues to be Pete Alonso and what's going to happen with him and the Mets. John and I will talk about that. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. Hey, Yankee fans, spring training is here and not to be missed. The New York Post has partnered with True Fan Travel to build the ultimate Yankee fan experience this spring down in Clearwater Beach, Florida. True Fan Travel is offering a 5-night stay at the Hilton Clearwater Beach Resort, tickets to 2 Yankee spring training games, and a meet and greet with former Yankee Lou Piniella. I've known Lou for almost 4 decades. He's a great storyteller. He would be a great person to be around to hear all the great stuff. I'll tell you one good Lou Piniella story that I really like. Lou was the manager of the Yankees a few times, obviously, 86 to 88. He didn't leave the organization. George Steinbrenner loved Lou Piniella. And so Lou stayed. MSG was broadcasting the games then, and Lou was part of the broadcast team in 1989. But because of who he was stature-wise in the Yankee organization and how everyone knew he was so close to George Steinbrenner, Lou decided that year he would never go in the clubhouse because it would look like maybe he was trying to Bigfoot or get the job, and he stayed out of the clubhouse. Dallas Green was the manager. Bucky Dent finished out that year after Dallas Green was fired. Lou stayed out, and you know what? It worked perfect for him. The Yankees didn't rehire Lou. The Reds hired Lou, and in 1990, the Reds won the World Series with Lou Piniella as their manager. So I'm sure Lou could regale you with stories about the Reds, how he used the Nasty Boys, but certainly his time as a player and manager of the Yankees. So join us on this special 5-day extravaganza from March 16th to 21st with access to an all-inclusive St. Patrick's Day party that includes food, drinks, and live entertainment. Yankee fans, you will not want to miss this trip of a lifetime. For more details, go to truefantravel.com or click on the link in the description below. John, it's January 28th as we're doing this, and Pete Alonso is still an unsigned free agent as we're doing the show. It's obviously obsessive talk here in New York. We have terrible football teams, so we weren't worried about one of them getting to the Super Bowl or anything like that, or even into the playoffs. So there's been a lot of Alonso talk here. It was spurred further over the weekend. The Mets had a bit of a fan fest, and Steve Cohen certainly didn't tamp down fire by mentioning that he was uncomfortable with the financial structures being floated by the Alonso camp. I wonder, again, I point this out every week. Nobody works harder on staying on top of the market than Jon Heyman. John, where do you think we are, and what do you think this all means?
Well, I mean, I think they're still talking, but there's no guarantee. Obviously, we're in late January at this point. I know guys have signed in late February, so there's still time for them to sign with the Mets or somebody else. But at this moment, I don't know. You tell me if you agree. It feels like he wants to come back more than they want him. You know, we can talk about what Pete's offering, but the reality of it is, as far as we know, the Mets have talked to Jock Peterson and Jurickson Profar and even Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, these are all guys older than Pete Alonso. And, presumably if they'd signed Goldschmidt, that would have closed the door. I'm not sure if the other guys would have. They've now signed Winker. They've set a couple of deadlines. It feels like, Alonso is trying harder than the Mets are. And not to be critical of the Mets. I mean, obviously they had a great offseason. They signed the biggest contract ever for one of the best players in baseball now. I'm not being critical of them. It's just the way it feels right now.
Yeah, John, a few things there, and I think you framed it really well as always, is I do think a lot of the fan base has forgotten they signed Juan Soto. They've acted like, oh, the Mets are cheap, or what have they done this offseason? Well, they signed the largest contract ever, which included the largest signing bonus ever, which included the most money per year ever. Like, That's a significant amount. The payroll is going to be up over 300 million again, I suspect. I did write in a column recently, like if you were trying to figure out the four reasons why he's not signed, one of them you have to include is, are the Mets kind of will-punning it, not cheap, but making an offer they know he'll refuse? So because they really don't want him back, to your point that they've looked at other people. But what I keep coming back to, John, and I wonder if this makes sense to you, I made this long list where I kind of went back. I was trying to find the moment where players like Alonso got hurt in the market. There used to be a time if you were Greg Vaughn, you could be the highest paid player in free agency in an offseason, which he actually was with the Tampa Bay Rays as a kind of just a home run hitter, whatever. And it feels to me a little bit like the last time you go back to about 9 off seasons ago, Chris Davis, like Alonso, coming off his age 29 season, gets 7 years at 161 million. And then it's like, it feels like the metric revolution of not paying for that kind of single dimensional corner player began, to the point where like the closest you get again is maybe Nick Castellanos at 5 at 100 as a corner outfielder. By the way, both of those players were Scott Boras clients. And I just wonder, did Alonso have to say, hey, I'm not playing 20 years ago where I might have gotten 150, $200 million because the home run alone would have paid for it, and gotten into a lower number earlier to some degree? I hope that makes sense, kind of where I just went with that.
I mean, it's clearly been a reevaluation of these corner sluggers. Part of it is really some of these deals are regrettable. I mean, I don't know that they'll regret Pujols. They helped them get a TV deal, or Cabrera, who's an all-time great, but they probably didn't perform to the level of their contract. Fielder, same thing. Chris Davis was a disaster. I mean, obviously Mark Teixeira, I think that was, you'd look back on and say that was a fine contract, but that seems to be the outlier. The market changed with Goldschmidt with 130 and with Freddie Freeman at 162. I mean, Olsen, I think, is a different category because he was 2 years away and getting to leave Oakland at the time to go to his hometown team. And he still did pretty well in my mind, considering all of those factors. But I clearly there's been a reevaluation of it. I didn't expect him to get the Fielder deal. I think Fielder is Fielder was 27. I didn't expect that, but I'm a little surprised that, maybe he just wants to go back to the Mets so badly and he has got better offers out there. But I mean, to me, Pete Alonso's hit the most home runs in the National League over the last 6 years. He's turned himself into probably an average first baseman, if not very close to average. He's particularly good on scoops. I'm surprised. I'm sure he's surprised. Assuming that there aren't other great deals out there, and he's not got this idea that he needs to go back to the Mets.
Yeah, look, I think he's probably to some degree a lot more open to the Mets now because the marketplace is closed on him a little bit. Like it wasn't long ago where maybe the Cubs would have been thought of it, the Red Sox maybe. And it's just harder and harder as we get later in the winter to see who has money. Does a team like the Reds break out of it all of a sudden and say this? I do think that there is a negativity around the non-athlete, non-defense, all that stuff. But Pete Alonso still does the thing that's kind of most important in baseball. It's hard to score runs, and he hits the ball out of the ballpark. And it feels like there should be, while not the deals of old, like right, Chris Davis, but that somebody values the idea of he is a star who hits the ball out of the ballpark. What is that worth in this marketplace when everyone is playing the biomechanics? John, again, I forgive me, just a little side thing here is because I've been asking so many Alonso questions now for a while. I'm like, what am I missing here? And somebody who has no shot of signing Pete Alonso said, you don't understand what's kind of like going on with like biomechanics behind the thing, where how much money is being dumped into it, about body types and what ages well and what swings could adapt to age and stuff like that, and who's ahead of the curve on that. He said, Pete doesn't score well on these things. And I just think everything in modernity has hurt Pete Alonso and this market.
Yeah, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know about predicting body types, but I'll say analytics has gone in another direction. Didn't analytics tell us? I don't know, it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago that the best play in baseball was the three-run homer, and that home runs were so valuable. And if you look at it, I mean, the most consistent home run hitters in baseball, obviously he's not judged in another category, but basically Ohtani, Soto, and Alonso, I mean, he's in the top five of the consistent home run hitters. And I mean, he does play every day. There's a lot to be said about Pete Alonso that we're not focusing on right now. He plays every day. There are first basemen who started similarly who wound up being great in their 30s. They didn't have that. This was a little bit maybe before all these other deals that went south. But I mean, Jim Thome hit 369 home runs after age 30. He was not a small man. I mean, I guess they have more science to back this up, and one example isn't going to do it. But as I said, I'm shocked. I'm not shocked that Pete Alonso is still out there because we've seen guys who are still out there. I'm shocked that he's made this concession of I'll do a 3-year deal. Right? Isn't a term the biggest sticking point in baseball? He conceded, and he's gonna do a 3-year deal, and they still can't figure it out.
Yeah, maybe Jim Thome is an outlier. I just say this. I'm always thankful he's about the nicest man I've ever met
He's a
because
strong
the
guy.
I don't know about you, when Jim is a handshaker and his hands are so big and strong, whenever I shake hands with him, I'm always like, I count my fingers when I get him back just to make sure. Not like he's so naturally strong, even at his current age, that maybe we shouldn't compare. But John, can I just say this?
I think you say on the handshake. I've had that experience with him, and he's not doing it on purpose. Unlike Al Leiter, who musters all, he's strong too, but musters all the strength and tries to hurt us when he's shaking our hand.
Yes.
I believe Jim Thome is a natural strength.
Yes, natural strength and a wonderful guy. John, just to build on your point, I thought once he got down to acceptance of 3 years, that there would be more of a market at like an average value higher than some of the current first basemen because he was willing to do 3 years. So again, the marketplace, is it the streaming money? Is it there's just so much working against him that even at this willingness, to your point, which I think is such a vital, important, and well-phrased point by you, that once you get down to, hey, I'm not asking for 7, I'm not asking for 6, I'm not asking for 5, I'm asking for 3. I thought there'd be something there for him. I'm surprised that there isn't. Is this groupthink? What's going on here?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. One thing I would say that optionality, as I'm told it's called, it does have a big value. And we did see Chapman do that contract with the options and turn it into $151 million, which that's a lot of money to me for him. He's a good player, but that's a lot. Snell, same thing, turning into 182 million. And it didn't work for everybody. Jordan Montgomery, poor thing, has to suffer for 47 million with his 6 ERA. But I do think that there is a big value on these options. And, it's hard to judge unless you've got all the computers and went to Harvard like David Stearns, exactly what the value of that is. And, he does have the qualifying offer too. So
That's the other thing. Yeah, I was going to
buy
mention that.
an option and a 1-year opt out, and he's got the qualifying offer. He can leave after 1 year, and you've given up some kind of a draft choice. Now, San Francisco did that with Snell last year. They did that with Chapman last year. Teams are willing to do that if they really want to win and are willing to give up their draft. But I think that qualifying offer, look, Pavetta's still out there, and we haven't heard word one about him in the last month. A qualifying offer is a big factor
No doubt.
for guys. Unless you're Juan Soto or Burns or Fried, it's a factor.
Yeah, I was going to mention the qualifying off. Again, I think if we were making a list of 1 to 10 of what could work against the free agent, from position to body type to age to, like streaming service, who's got money in this marketplace, who went first, I think he'd go 10 for 10 against Pete. So
But
I'm
he
gonna
does
talk
have
crazy.
rare power. He does have that rare power.
Yes, yes.
That overcame a lot in previous negotiations and years. And So far, it doesn't appear to be doing it.
To your point, the game has flipped on that, right? Like there were like the original Moneyball thing, and maybe this is why it does. I remember, and again, the Yankees were better than the A's, but the Yankees were beating the A's in the playoffs because a guy like John Jaha was playing at every position, like they didn't have, skilled players like the Yankees did. And so I always was against that theory. John, last week when I was alone, I talked about the Hall of Fame a little. Before we close up here, this is our show. You haven't had a shot on the show to kind of like give your thoughts on the Hall of Fame. Give us your best 90 seconds on what you thought of Hall of Fame voting, ins, outs, whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think the writers did well, and I'm a writer, so I got a bias in that. But I know there's a lot of focus on the one numbskull who didn't put Ichiro on, and who knows what the reason is. And it's not just the focus publicly. I mean, it's a focus of these players, right? Jeter made a funny joke about got one guy who didn't vote for him, and Ichiro seemed, at least he mentioned it. I don't want to say he's focused on it, but there's one in every crowd. That's all I'll say. Sabathia, I think he definitely deserved it. I think we got that right. I'd like to see Beltran get in. I do believe he's to me, he's a clear Hall of Famer. Andre Jones, to me, a little more borderline, but 400 home runs and 10 Gold Gloves. I don't want to say I'm a big Hall or a small Hall guy. This year I was big Hall because I want to keep guys going. I want to keep the conversation going. We saw Billy Wagner go from 10% to get in. We saw Roland go from 10% to get in. Andre Jones started at 7%. He likely will get in, if not next year, the year after. So I don't like that rule. I want to get rid of that rule, and that's why partly why I voted for 10 this time. I don't get big Hall or small Hall. I think you should be medium Hall. You should go by the precedent that's already been set to be fair for everybody. But I think generally we did very well, except for that one numbskull.
Yeah, I'll probably talk about the one numbskull later in the show. But I agree with you, and I also think, John, if I were just like feeding off of what you said about like keeping people on the ballot, I think that's going to happen a ton next vote because of the not starry class that's coming on the ballot. The best players coming on the ballot are Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun, who I would assume both are not Hall of Famers, though maybe the starting pitching thing will shift enough that Cole Hamels will get some support along the way. And because of that, I think there'll be this revisiting of Dustin Pedroia and Chase Utley and a few other guys who were Andy Pettit, Mark Burley, who were down ballot. And people like to vote. Like, as somebody who votes for fewer than most, you take a bunch of crap for doing that instead of just writing the 10 names. So I think people, John, when you and I first started, there were a bunch of grumpy old men who taught us how to do this job, and they were all trying to keep people out of the Hall of Fame. And I think that the younger group is trying to figure out how to get people in the Hall of Fame. And so I think that's going to like raise up that bottom group. I think Beltran and Jones get in because of that next year. And then I think this bottom group comes up a little bit.
Well, good. Beltran and Jones should be in. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's better that we're a little more generous. Yeah, you grew up with some real grumpy old men. I don't think the guys I worked with were as grumpy or as old as they did at UPI, right?
Yeah, they could have hung out with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. They were such grumpy old men. So, it's yeah. The story of the offseason so far, like the story of October, is the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'll talk about all of it with their general manager, Brandon Gomes, who joins us next on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John and I are so happy and pleased to be joined by the general manager of the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, Brandon Gomes. And look, if it was just the World Series championship, we'd still want to talk to you, Brandon, but you've come on the World Series of the offseason as well. The Dodgers are the story. And I just wonder, I was thinking about this when I knew you were going to be kind enough to join us. Is there an actual meeting at some point after you win this thing where you guys sit down and say, let's not sit on our laurels, whatever it takes, let's keep going to the extent you did? And if you did, I hate to ask a two-part question, how is this what it looked like? Like you would get Sasaki, Snell, Tanner Scott, keep Teoscar Hernandez, extend Edmonds, keep trying. I mean, I guess there's a lot in there, but go ahead.
Yeah. With so much focus during the postseason, it's just on those games, and it's hard to even have the the mental capacity to be focusing on the off season. And of course, you don't want it to end. So, you kind of have a little bit of it in the background, some stuff that you've prepped earlier in the year to have an idea of who's going to be available. But really, we won. We had like the travel back Halloween parade, and then we're on a plane to the GM meetings on that Sunday. So we took those days to really huddle up and, hone in on like the details of what the offseason could potentially look like. And, obviously none of this can happen without incredible support from our ownership group and saying, hey, look, that's great. We won in 24. Like, let's keep building towards, 25 now. 24 has nothing to do with 25. Let's make sure we're continuing to put out the best possible team we can. And that doesn't happen without ownership. So, that was very clear early on, like, continue to do that, give back to the fans who have been incredibly supportive of us. And that is the goal of the offseason. And we've been able to, fortunately enough, execute at a high level.
I've never seen a roster this good. Have you ever heard the argument that you're too good, that it's bad for baseball? And I guess that doesn't prevent you. And I need to ask, are you still going? I can't even imagine.
We are focused on and tasked with making sure our team is as good as possible. And if that is creating, ire elsewhere, that's fine, because I think that means our fans are very happy, which is what the goal is. So, I think the nature of our sport, the nature of the playoff format, like, you can be technically the best team, and it doesn't guarantee you anything. So all we're doing is making sure that we have as talented as a team as possible. A lot of these moves, I'm sure you've heard, us and Andrew and others talk about it, is with the goal of not having to go out in July and go and, trade for guys. And hopefully we are creating both impact moves with high-end talent and depth to not have to go and do something in July. If we have to, we will. But the goal is to be like, hey, this team is good enough as is to go out and make a deep run into the playoffs. Obviously, first step is getting there.
Look, John and I are familiar with the evil empire, right? It was the Yankees when we were covering them 20-ish years ago, and we're familiar with it. It was interesting. When they started layering on more known talent, the Randy Johnsons, Alex Rodriguez, Jason Giambi, they didn't win championships. So I agree with you. It's not, and nothing's guaranteed, though I think it's probably guaranteed that you're in the playoffs at this point. Sorry, I won't jinx you.
You're unlocked.
But are you, from your brethren in the sport, do you hear blowback from this? Do people come up to you and say, hey, you haven't done anything against the rules. I might do it too, but this just isn't good for us?
No, I haven't heard that personally. And I think a lot of this is, like you said, like going out, and a good portion of it is already what we had in place coming into the year, and those guys just coming back. And obviously being able to add, Edman and Kopech at the deadline last year. So it's kind of taking our 24 team, so much of the team that was, standing there at the end in the World Series. Like, we were missing a lot of really talented pitchers, especially from that group. So getting those back is a huge boost in and of itself. And then being able to add around that and continue to reinforce was the goal. So I think, we've had a busy offseason. Some of it was just bringing guys back that we felt were very important to the team to maintain both the high level of talent and what was a really impressive clubhouse and tightly knit group. So haven't heard that much from our group. That's just not something that we're all that focused on, because like I said, we're trying to do whatever we can for our fan base to make sure we're putting ourselves in a position to win.
Your rotation and the bullpen is as stacked as I've ever seen it. I should ask you, are you with three not just three Japanese starters, three great Japanese starters, is the six-man rotation a foregone conclusion? and who gets to tell Glass now, Sasaki, whomever it is, that they're the fifth and sixth guys in the rotation.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll have a 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 designation. It'll just so happen to be where guys fall out into days of the week. But a lot of it, as we went through the Roki process, was saying, hey, we are in a unique position because of A, having Shohei, and B, just what we feel like is a good amount of depth in our starting pitching group to be able to build him up and get him on track in the big league schedule in a way that is prudent and allow him to get used to that schedule without having to say, hey, you're going to get like 1 or 2 starts with an extra day rest, and then we're jumping into a 4-man. Like, that's hard. We did some of it last year with Yama, getting him extra days to ease in, and he get to a point where, he can throw on 5 days rest. And I'm sure at some point, if we needed to, he'd be able to go shorter than that. But we're in the position where we have the depth and the benefit of Shohei not counting against our pitching staff that will be able to provide ample rest. And I would assume there's times that a 6-man makes sense, and also times where we have a bunch of off days and we can pivot and make sure we're taking big picture in mind as well.
When you say Ohtani doesn't count against your pitching staff because he's also a DH, it means you could still carry essentially like a 13 and a half pitchers, right?
Right. So you maintain
plus 13.
Yes. The 6-man rotation is challenging when you then have a 7-man bullpen, and we know how hard that is. That takes one short start to kind of blow things up. So his ability to be a two-way player, we can still maintain an 8-man bullpen, which is incredibly helpful.
Can you tell it, like, what is the plan with Ohtani? Do you imagine he's a starter from being able to start from day one, coming back from Tommy John surgery? What do you envision? What's from now until he starts a game? What you envision?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to continue his rehab program. And last year, it was challenging because as he was about to get into a deeper part of the pitching progression, we were going into the playoffs and talked like, okay, is it really worth ramping up to live BPs as you're taking your first playoff at bats? Like, we can't risk losing this guy from our lineup. So that was a give and take. So there's a little bit of, we're making sure we hit these boxes on the front end here, and we'll build him up. And then when he's ready to go and has gone through his live BPs, then he can kind of plug back into the rotation. But a lot of that is figuring it out along the way because of the unique nature of, he can't just go out on a rehab assignment, right? Like, we would lose our DH, who happens to be a pretty good hitter. So, we'll see how these things continue to progress, and we have a decent idea. But, we haven't done this as an organization before. So we'll take his feedback and make sure it fits all together with making sure that he's as healthy as possible in the batter's box, and then also on the mound, but, through the stretch run of the regular season and into October.
Would you agree with me that Ohtani is the greatest free agent signing in history and the best deal for a team, just based on not only what he does on the field but off the field as well, what his value is? And was there anything that he did that surprised you? I mean, he was spectacular again, third unanimous MVP, but anything you learned about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the dedication to his routine and process each day, the homework that he would do, digging in on pitchers tells, like, Shohei's obviously fast. He's not the fastest guy in the big leagues. So he is putting in the homework, understanding the times to run, pick and choose his spots, and making sure that it's balanced out with the game situation. So his routine and how dialed in he is on that is a whole nother level than what anybody could have expected. And then you start to think about, he just went 50-50, was this amazing player. And he's also one of the best pitchers in the game. It's kind of hard to fathom. There were times last year we just forgot that he was also going to pitch the following year. So, really excited to watch both sides of it this year and watch him go through his process on that side, working with our pitching group, and see what, raise this game to another level on that side as well.
The garage where I keep my car, a guy asked me the other day before the weekend, who do you like in the playoffs? And I said, well, when I see somebody beat the Chiefs, I'll believe they will beat the Chiefs. And I kind of was saying that about you and Sasaki the whole way. When I see him sign with one of the other 29 teams, I'll believe it. I'm always assuming he was going to sign with you. So can you address two things? Obviously, there was a lot of questions. Did you know this was going to happen the whole way? Did you have something with him? Address that. And then also, what kind of advantage do you think you have as the team of Japan, where clearly your hats, your merchandise, your games are being shown there? You have this thing going on there. If you could address the two things.
Yeah, so much of this during the process was like there was just not that much info about Roki. We had heard, hey, it could be small market. Hey, LA could be good. So we didn't know if these things were working for us or against us through the whole thing. And, during the first meeting when we're diving in on what we feel like is a strong suit of our group of talking through, okay, here's what we think about how your velocity, it was still like top 10 in the big leagues, but it dropped off, from last year. We felt like we put together a very good presentation, and Roki kept everything very close, and there wasn't, very minimal questions, and it sounded like that was the process throughout. So anytime anybody went through that, there was just a lot of like, I think we did well, but I'm not totally positive. And, at no point during it until we got that text from Shohei were we like confident in any way, because of so much of the other storylines that were going along with it, of like smaller market, maybe LA's not the place, don't know how this all fits in. And, really fortunate at the end of the day. I think there were a lot of reasons why he should come here, but we are biased, obviously. And, once we got that text from Show, I was like, oh my God, okay, this is incredible. I know everybody over the years has put in, a bunch of teams has followed him, or we've had scouts go and see almost every one of his starts. So there's a lot of work that went into it. So to be able to actually have him choose us at the end was incredibly gratifying for a lot of reasons. A lot of hard work that went into it, but also being able to add him to a very talented team is very special.
Since your bullpen performed better than any of the other bullpens in the postseason, I think it was pretty much of a surprise that you added to Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. So I don't think we're going to be surprised by anything. But at this point, obviously we know there are big names out there: Bregman, Alonso, Mary Arenado. At this moment, can we assume that Clayton Kershaw is going to be the most likely big name coming back to the Dodgers, or is anything else could be on the table too?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously stayed in touch with Kersh, and I think our sentiments are out there, and assuming, and we know Kersh also wants to be a Dodger for life, so we'll continue to be in contact with him. On the other fronts, like, look, you never say never, and we'll continue to be opportunistic at looking at places on how to round out the roster. But we feel very happy with what we've done to this point, and if spring training, started tomorrow, we feel like we'd be in a very good place.
You mentioned one of the things when you were answering a question here earlier, Brandon, about like you didn't have a lot of your players available to you, last year. That was a lot of pitching, right? You had a lot of arm injuries, and this has been a subject. Andrew Friedman, your president of baseball operations, has talked about trying to double down and figure out arm injuries, especially for you guys. You've had a number of them, a lot of your young pitching. Where are you in this navigation? Do you feel at peace? Do you think it was random? Do you think there's something the Dodgers are doing that is putting further stress on arms than maybe other organizations? Where are you in this process?
Yeah, we talked actually during the bye week of before the DS. We had a bunch of our PD group in town, our performance coach, met with them and really trying to peel back layers of like, okay, what does it look like in the minor leagues? A lot of the build-ups. We're keeping guys healthy in the minor leagues. They're coming to the big leagues and getting hurt and trying to understand that process. And we're making adjustments on that front of like what we're trying to solve for. We were keeping guys healthy in the minor leagues, just not in the big leagues. So where are we actually preparing them for a major league workload? Because we talk about this all the time. Like if you throw 75 pitches in the big leagues, that's 100, 110 pitches in the minor league. Like that stress level, the intensity, all of that. So, really looking at that again, trying to understand what guys are doing in between starts in a better way. So we had another meeting last week and plan to touch base again in spring training to just make sure that this is an ongoing conversation and continuing to move the ball forward on things that we can control. A lot of these arm injuries in general, I think there were so many compounding events over the last few years of COVID and rule changes and pitch, like all of these things put together and guys just throwing harder. It's hard to pinpoint like, oh, that is why guys are getting hurt. So we're trying to pull those things apart and understand each component of it, and the things that we feel confident in that we can make adjustments to, we do, and making sure we're not knee-jerk reacting to some of the other pieces. So we feel like we're chipping away, and obviously we hope after our meetings in spring training, we have an even better sense in making adjustments and continue to do that, not only just this offseason, but into the season and next year, and keep making it better to try to help, mitigate this issue, it's been a Dodgers issue, but it's also an industry issue.
I mean, Mookie Betts, we know he's amazing, but what's your assessment of him as a shortstop? Are you committed there? Is there possibility for second base? And a semi-related question, those two Yankee Stadium thugs, aren't we glad that they're out for now? And shouldn't they have been arrested?
So Mookie, Mookie is never a guy that I will bet against. I feel like he can just be good at whatever he puts his mind to, and he has really dedicated himself, and he's been working with Chris Woodward, who we're bringing back as one of our coaches, and he's got his guys that he's been diving in on, and he feels great. The feedback has been excellent, and a lot of Mookie's struggles last year came from the throwing. He was doing the hardest parts of the position. He was getting off the ball great. He was getting to balls. The range was all there. It was mostly mostly the throwing. So his footwork, and you go watch him when he seamlessly made the transition back out to right field, and the arm strength is not an issue, and it's accurate. So it was about getting the footwork down at the shortstop position. So we feel really good about where Mookie is at right now. He's in a great headspace, very confident that he can do it. And when he came to us, he was like, hey, if I have a full off season, I can do this, and I want to do this. Like, great, because the old right field to shortstop transition doesn't happen too often. But I'm not going to be the guy that bets against Mookie, who's one of the best athletes that I've ever seen.
I believe a couple of the players who came to you, look, Sasaki obviously could have gone anywhere. Like Tanner Scott, I believe, could have gotten more money other places, maybe a few other guys. Obviously, you're a winning team. There's attraction to this. What do you think is drawing players to you to maybe even leave some money on the table or defer in some cases, which lowers the actual value in real time? What's going on in the Dodger shop that's attractive?
Yeah, I feel like it's a couple things. One is obviously players love to win, right? And we feel like year in and year out, we're putting ourselves in a position to be a championship contender. That's one. That's the most straightforward one. We, as a group, as a coaching staff, Dave, our front office, our ownership, creating a culture of like players wanting to be there, enjoying being there, making sure we're taking care of families, and all of those things that may get lost at times. In these players have families and kids, and there's stressors off of the field. If you can handle those and make sure that that part of their life is in a good place, that allows them to focus more on the field. So if they're feeling good, everybody's feeling valued, and that we're trying to take care of everybody. in the way that they should be taken care of. I do think it becomes this like destination spot, the way we travel, all of the things that compound. And now I do feel like it's just becoming more word of mouth. We've said it for a while. It's one of our selling points when we're talking to free agents, but it's way more powerful when other players are saying it, whether it's guys who are here or guys that are done playing, whatever. That is the most powerful thing, is word of mouth. Because if I say it or Dave says it or Andrew says it, it's not, it's something, but it's not everything. But now that these players talk, the community is so small. You're one player away from knowing everybody in the big leagues. And I think it's that combination of winning culture and how, we're doing our best to take care of our players and their families and all of those things that has made this a place where, like, hey, that's where I want to be.
Brandon, as a way to wrap up here, and again, John and I appreciate so much you joining us, is I think you've made the playoffs 12 straight years, 11 division titles, 2 championships now. So the expectations are obviously always large for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I don't know if you could go larger than larger, but it does feel like the bullseye on you guys is going to be extreme because of where you've taken the payroll, how you've dominated Japan, the number of stars you've brought in. What do you think about if the bullseye could get bigger on a defending champion and what it means for your group?
Yeah, I mean, I think like last year, the bullseye was definitely on us. This year we won. Okay, set that aside. I think this group is so focused on the little things and how you win games and making sure that they are a united front and pulling for each other, that a lot of that noise kind of gets left outside of the clubhouse and outside of the stadium. And it's a good thing if there's a target on your back. It means you're good. It means you're expected to win. That's our expectation too. I don't think there's anybody in that clubhouse that expects us to not win. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. But the expectation is we are all going to be upset if we do not win. And that hasn't really changed. I haven't been here as long as some of other people, but that's never not been the case. It's way more external pressure that has come on. It's like, well, you guys have this team, and if you don't win, it's a failure. It's like, okay, that was the same thing that was said last year and the year before. And I think it's a really laser focus of the group and our superstars that come in and hold each other accountable to, like, we're going to do the little things and, take it step by step. And then now having won last year again, I think there's a whole new, the complacency part I'm not concerned about at all with this group. And then adding on the talent that we did to an already really talented group, I think should fuel the fire even more to be hungry to go out and win a championship in 25.
I actually have one more question that I neglected to ask. Dave Roberts, going into the year and then going into the playoffs, and I know I was there for all your series, at least the end of the Padres series. There was public thoughts that, could he be in trouble? I thought that was nuts myself. The guy's record is fabulous.
Yep.
What do you want to say about Dave Roberts? He's got, I think, a year to go. Would you like to keep him as the manager of the Dodgers?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's something that we're going to, address here in the coming weeks. We said this early in the offseason, like, hey, we had no time to prepare. Let us get through this. Dave, we want Dave here. He's our manager. He's been incredible. So, let's get through the bulk of the offseason, and then we'll go ahead and talk through that. So that is still the plan, and we'll get to that here in the coming weeks.
Well, Dave is a big friend of this show, so you need to get that done. But
yep.
you're kind also, Brandon. The second time you've joined us on the show, and the Dodgers were the story of October, but they've also been the story of the offseason. So John and I appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.
John and I, of course, thank Brandon Gomes for joining us on the show. John, hit or error?
Well, I'm going to give an error. I think I'm on a roll with my errors lately. I've become the negative one. You're the positive one now, I think. I don't know. I'm going to go a little bit unusual and go for the error for our related to our guest. And we don't normally do that, give an error to our guest. It's not really him, but The Dodgers, to me, they're too good at this point. You can't blame them, but it's unfortunate for baseball. They have the best rotation in baseball by far, the deepest rotation, the best bullpen, the deepest bullpen, the best lineup. They have the best of everything. I've never seen a team like this. Give them credit. They've done a spectacular job. Their big contracts were all great. I don't think there's a better contract in baseball than Ohtani. Freeman and Betts are obviously great contracts. How they knew that Tommy Edman was going to be a superstar, I don't know, but I give them credit. So I'm not criticizing them, but it's unfortunate, I think, for the game that they're this good. I mean, we've heard of evil empires before, but they've taken over that moniker. They are the evil empire right now.
John, as you mentioned, they're playing by the rules and trying to win. So there's just large scale, no criticism. My only thing is, and this rule should be changed, I wonder what you think about it, is you could defer money, but whatever you actually are paying the guy, like Ohtani shouldn't count like 46 million for luxury tax purposes. It should be 70 million. It's a 10-year, $700 million contract because, as we know, they're a giant hedge fund. They're taking his money, investing it, and then paying him and still making money on what's over $1 billion in deferred money for all these guys. It's an advantage. They'll have Steve Cohen, other people who do this. It's fine if you want to defer it, but whatever the contract is should be the average annual value, which goes towards luxury tax, because I think they wouldn't have done some of these contracts if Ohtani costs 70 and everybody costs what the real amount is.
Well, Ohtani's worth 70. I got his in Intro to Economics and didn't follow up, so I'm not exactly sure. I do kind of think, I would guess that it's correct the way they do it, but there's something, I don't know. Should I say something needs to be done about the Dodgers? They're so good. There are rules about deferrals and funding, and apparently they're doing it within the rules, right? So
yes, they're totally within the rules. I just think that rule needs to be changed because they're gaming the system. We know that they're investing the money and making money off of Shohei Ohtani's money, or all these guys. Tommy Edman's deferred, Teoscar, and everyone's deferring. They got over $1 billion deferred, and it's a great little loophole. And they've taken, again, nothing illegal. They've taken advantage of a loophole.
I think it should be worth the net present value that I see, but like I said, in economics, you might be right. I don't know. I would say
I'm worse at economics.
I don't agree with is that if Ohtani doesn't only pays tax on the $2 million instead of the $46 million value to LA, and LA needs money now, and California needs the money, that I don't think is right. But again, don't rely on me for economics. We're going to have to get Keynes or Friedman or somebody, not Andrew Friedman, but the economist Friedman or somebody of that ilk on the show to really explain this. But I think that they're within the rules, and there's a reason that is the rule by net present value. So I'm going to assume that's correct. They're just too good right now. I don't know. Is that against the law?
No, I think we've gone far afield outside of baseball. I'll probably be there a little bit as I give a hit, which I'm going to give for the transparency of the vote of the baseball writers and the Hall of Fame, because nobody who votes for something important is more transparent than our group. Like, you want to take shots at the numbskull who didn't, using your word, who didn't vote for Ichiro, or who gets in or who doesn't, and say we don't deserve the vote. I'm fine. Like, we got the vote. Will others do it better? Trust me, the only vote that's perfect is yours. The idea that somehow you're going to get this body and everyone's going to go, this was a perfect vote, whatever. But if you want to throw us out, throw us out. But you got to come up with a better reason than like, where's the transparency? Where's the voters? The Oscars came out last week, the nominations for the Oscars. We have no idea who votes for it. We have no idea who just missed, what percentage. When the Oscars are held on March 2nd, we'll have no idea the winner of the best picture or best actor, best supporting actress, whatever, did they win by 1 vote or 70? The same is true with Emmys, Grammys, Tonys. By the way, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL are all Hall of Fames are all star chambers. We don't know anything. 75% of our members, more than 75% of our members, make our ballots public. Of that group, I think almost all of us explain why we voted in some forum, podcast, writing, TV, radio, whatever. And we voted to make all of the ballots public, and the Hall of Fame knocked that down. So I will say, if you want to strip us of the vote, fine, I'm cool. But it's nonsense where I hear people go, oh, they're hiding, whatever. Hiding, trust me, people who are voting for the Oscars are freaking hiding. People who are voting for the NFL Hall of Fame, like, come out. They have a non-disclosure thing. Like, don't tell anybody why you did anything. And so I will accept any criticism of our group, but I will not accept the criticism of lack of transparency.
No, I mean, I think it's great individually that we are transparent about it. My concern about that is that there's peer pressure affecting the results. So I think it's
Definitely, yeah.
you have to be transparent, and you're allowed to make your vote and not make it public, because that's part of the. And I think a reevaluation is necessary. That's why I'm going to keep guys on the ballot. But I do think that some peer pressure is affecting some of the vote, and that's the drawback to the public, making it public. So I agree with you that we're doing great with it, but I'm concerned a little bit by the fact that people are afraid to vote for somebody just because that's the way the momentum is going.
John, the only thing I'll say about peer pressure is that is a personal decision where people decide to look at social media or look at email. Like, that's a personal choice. If you can't stand the heat of the vote, then don't vote. Vote for who you think should be the Hall of Fame or MVP or whatever the vote is, and then just don't look at social media. And then you won't feel this peer pressure. To me, that's about each individual voter not being able to keep the door closed on mean-spiritedness. So I'm a big one for let's all be transparent, where it should be a transparent business. Tommy Hogan, our producer, thanks so much for helping us through yet another show. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to our podcast, rate and review us. Please follow us. The New York Post YouTube page, sports YouTube page. You can watch the podcast. And John, I think we got one more show we're doing before we're going to have to figure out how to do the shows when we're both floating around Florida and Arizona. But I look forward to it, and I hope everyone does as well if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.